clearly establishing who it was that was to rule Ireland for all time. In the words of Pope Adrian IV, he says, "It is not doubted and you know it, that Ireland and all those islands which have received the faith belong to the Church in Rome. If you wish to enter that island, to drive vice out of it, to cause law to be obeyed, and St. Peter's pence to be paid by every house, it will please us to assign it to you." So when we're talking about double-headed eagles and monarchic control versus theocratic control, this is what we mean. The king is on his knees before the Pope. The king is asking permission. He's got the swords, he's got the army, but he's asking permission from the theocrats of the world. And so the control mechanism, this ordo ab chao situation, exists today. The ideological takeover, the eradication of the old ways, the supplanting of a religion, a Chaldean religion, a form of Christianity that would appeal to the people because it was in fact hybridized from ancient Ammonism and ancient Druidism. You wipe out the original, but you've got the copy, you've got the facsimile. And you repackage that and you put it in front of the people, and they're mind controlled into believing that this is still authentic. And from that point on, you proceed. You have people completely under your power. Colonization. Terry Jones, in his work The Primitive Celts, he wrote, "It seems to me the Celtic world is not so much a world that has been lost as a world that was deliberately obliterated by a ruthless empire." And how right he was, because that basically sums up the whole situation. Look at the Bible's passages. Let's reread them with an understanding of what we're talking about. For instance, Ezekiel 17. "I, the Lord, have brought down the high tree," which I believe means the Druids and the Egyptian Magi of old. "Have exalted the low tree," which I believe refers to the Atonists. "I have dried up the green tree," that again refers to the Druids, "and have made the dry tree to flourish. I, the Lord," and I believe that means Aton, the Lord of Judaism and Christianity, "I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it." The historian, Roman historian Tacitus, says, "If you want to rule the world, the whole world, does it follow that everyone else welcomes enslavement? The robbery, slaughter, plunder, they give the lying name freedom. They make a wilderness and call it peace." While recounting the story of the children of Meal, a few historians remind us that having defeated the Tuatha De Danann, that's the High Druids of Ireland, the brothers Eber and Eramon, each desiring to be kings over Ireland, fell to quarrelling and fighting. They admit that the so-called historical cycle of Ireland opened with divisiveness and conflict. Humans had defeated the gods, Atonism had defeated paganism, and the rivers ran with blood. Here's a little timeline, again to keep us aware of the historical process. Akhenaten's reign is thought to have ended about 1336 BC. Allegedly he attempted to return and seize power again under the reign of the Ammonist king Seti I, around about 1290 to 1279 BC. There's even a record of this time saying that the Shasu, or the exiles, were busy making trouble for the king. However, Seti dealt with them by basically eradicating the threat once and for all. The Egyptian people did not want this demagogue back in power. Then we have the building of the Temple of Solomon, allegedly around 957 BC. We have the so-called captivity of the 12 tribes of Israel, around about 722 BC by the Assyrians, and then by the Babylonians in 586 BC. Then we find these Judites, or more correctly the Atonists, dispersing and moving westward, as we talked about, probably around about 550 BC. They moved to Scythia, of course, as we said. They moved to Spain, possibly France. And by the time they get round to conquering and attacking Ireland, it's probably around 500 BC. That's the 6th century BC. There's infighting amongst themselves and dynastic rivalry. persists. Of course, this is an old story. And they also would have had to put up with continued resistance from the Irish and Scottish and British druids. They also then have the Roman invasion under Augustus in 34 BC, and then again under Julius Caesar in 55 BC. There's a lot of British history starts at this point. There's difficulty conquering Scotland, and we have Hadrian's Wall in the period after that. And then we basically have the Christ and the Christianity story beginning. And of course, under that, I've always insisted that we are talking about Atenists when we're talking about the Chaldeans. This is the so-called Christian sect of monks in Britain. And let's never forget, when it comes to talking about the Caesars, that these individuals were also, very much like the Egyptians, considered godlike. For instance, Caesar Augustus, the adopted son of Julius Caesar. In fact, most of the key terms used for Jesus were originally attributed to him, to Augustus Caesar, the most important of which was Divi Filius, Son of God. In the picture on the right there, there's Augustus styled, depicted as an Egyptian pharaoh in Nubia. This is very important to bring out. What was the connection between the Roman Caesars and the Egyptians? The book goes into that, looking at the power of the Atenists. And they not only just seated themselves in Britain, but they had large coteries, large followings from Babylon and into Greece. The city of Athens, for instance, which people think is named after the goddess Athena. That is, could it also be that Athens, is there a connection there? And what about Rome? What about those great patrician families of Rome who always looked to Egypt as the land of the greatest kings and the greatest pharaohs and the greatest enlighteners? Could the Atenist elite families have taken refuge in Rome? Could they have been working behind some of these elite patrician families of Rome? Could, in fact, the Romans have come to Britain because they were sent? Instead of thinking that they did it on their own terms, could they have been mercenaries employed by the Atenists in order to continue the suppression of the druids, which probably wasn't working and taking too long? The Emperor Tiberius Claudius Nero, 42 to 16 BC. He's believed by the author Tony Bushby to be the father, no less, of the biblical Jesus by way of Mary, who lived in Rome. This would make Jesus a member of the powerful Claudian family of Rome. Well, such a man could conceivably commission historians such as Paul to pen whatever he demanded. Abelard Ruchelin, in the true authorship of the New Testament, wrote, "The New Testament, the Church, and Christianity were all creations of the Calpurnius Piso family, who were Roman aristocrats. The New Testament and all the characters in it, Jesus, all the Josephs and the Marys, all the disciples, apostles, even Paul and John the Baptist, were all fictional." The head of Scottish Rite Freemasonry in America, a senior member of the Masonic Lodge, Albert Pike, in his Morals and Dogmas, wrote something on this subject. He said the teachers, even of Christianity, are in general the most ignorant of the true meaning of that which they teach. There is no book which is so little known as the Bible. So the characters in the Bible are mythographs. They're based on other characters. The individuals who compiled and wrote the Bible were elites. Elites from Judea, elites from Rome, possibly elites from Britain. The story of the Bible, we go into it in the volumes. Fascinating alternative story of who conceived Christianity. Was it really conceived in the East, like we're told? Who was Paul? Who were his patrons? Where did this modern form of Atonism, and even one could say modern form of Ammonism in many respects, after all of these different groups appropriated the mythical tropes, the traditions of those that they supplanted. It's all a form of cannibalism. And when we're talking about Christianity, the same thing applies. They say Christianity is based on Judaism. As we saw earlier, what was Judaism based on? Was it based on the Atonism of Egypt?
So there you have it now. That's plenty to be thinking about, isn't it? Anyway, have a think about that and go searching for the next video. See you soon.